What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the channel. Today we have a pretty quick video for you guys, and we're going to be talking about my XP sliders, my recommended or realistic XP sliders here for Madden 21. This is a requested extension of my recommended franchise sliders and recommended sliders and things like that. I've had quite a few people ask about the XP sliders, and I've yet to show those, but we're going to break them out today in a separate video. Now, what I want to do when I preface this is I want to say that these can be utilized for connected franchise with users. This can be used with CPUs. Generally speaking, these sliders are going to be lower if you have a bunch of users, because users tend to have higher stats. So if you are in a user versus user league with basically all users, you want to consider which positions are gaining the most XP and which positions are gaining the highest stats, and consider adjusting down the XP slider for that position accordingly. Now, in my connected franchise, we've been running on a base of 90 for every single position to get an idea of where the XP slider should be, and then adjust from there. And so we've adjusted the sliders, and we found a bit of a sweet spot here, and I want to run through all of these today. I'm going to scroll through them first just so you guys can screenshot if you don't want to listen to me talk the whole way through. So here is the offensive XP sliders, and then if I scroll down real quick, you guys can get the defensive and special teams. So take your screenshots, and if you do want to listen to why we have these where we have them, please stick around. So with that being said, we're starting off with the quarterback XP slider. The reason that we have this so low is because it's too easy to progress quarterbacks in Madden 21. It's been too easy to progress quarterbacks compared to other positions for a long time. Generally speaking, it's not hard to take a low overall quarterback and turn them into a really good high overall quarterback. It's a little bit too easy, and so from that perspective, we've toned down the quarterback XP down to about 85. And this, like I said, this is going to make your franchise feel more realistic. It's going to be a little bit more difficult and a little bit more challenging to actually develop players. And in addition to these XP sliders, I highly recommend that you guys go in at the end of the year and adjust ratings for players that have been high performers, breakout players, and players that have regressed and have been bad performers. Like, let's say you have a star running back that played all 16 games and they only managed to get 500 yards. You guys should go in at the end of the season, in my personal opinion, and edit that player's overall down. That's something that we've started to do in our franchises, and something that I highly recommend you guys do if you want realistic XP in your franchises. You have to go in and regress players, because Madden just simply won't do that for bad performances and things like that, and it won't break out players necessarily the way that they need to. The next XP slider is halfbacks. We have this toned down to 90 because halfbacks do get a ton of XP, but they don't get it quite as fast as quarterbacks or wide receivers, and so we have this toned down to 90. Tight ends, it's pretty easy to increase their overalls as well, but not quite as easy as halfbacks or wide receivers, because obviously tight ends aren't getting the same volume as those other positions. So tight end is toned down to 95, while wide receivers, much like quarterback, is toned down to 85, because these are some of the easiest positions to get XP with. Now, fullbacks is a position that is greatly basically negated or not paid attention to when it comes to XP, and they don't get much XP whatsoever. So instead of taking this down, we actually have to bump this up a little bit. And likewise with the offensive line, guards, tackles, and centers all go up to 110, because offensive linemen just simply do not get enough XP in Madden 21. And on top of that, they start off offensive linemen lower than every single other position in the game. Good linemen are so far and few between in comparison to real life, and they're really hard to develop because you can't get dev upgrade challenges for them. Most of them are going to start out with normal dev. So in order to kind of counteract that and kind of, play this realistic where offensive linemen can actually be good and get good, you have to turn up the XP sliders for all of them. Then we go to defense. We leave defensive ends at 100 because we've kind of noticed that just leaving defensive ends at the base, they earn a reasonable amount of XP, not too much, not too little, and you can get a reasonable amount of upgrades out of them by leaving it at the base 100. Defensive tackles go up to 110 because it's pretty hard to get XP for D tackles. tackles, even if you have a ton of stats with them, it's pretty hard to earn XP for D tackles. They don't get a lot of tackles, you know what I mean? I mean, they're stuffing the middle and stuff like that. The only way that you're going to get stats with them is probably getting sacks and maybe tackle for loss, but it's going to be far less consistent than linebackers or corners or anything like that, so we take that one up to 110. Middle linebackers get toned down to 85. It's really easy to get a ton of XP with middle linebackers, and the easiest position in the game to get XP for is outside linebackers because you can set them on the edge. Most of them are fast enough to get to the quarterback, and if you get a free blitzer, they get sacked super easy. So outside linebackers have to be toned down to the lowest out of any of these, which is 80, because they are just simply too easy to get XP for. Now, if you have a problem in your league where defensive ends are, you're seeing the same problem with defensive ends, like 4-3 defensive ends that are getting to the quarterback and getting way too many sacks, and their overall is jumping too quickly, you might want to consider taking defensive end XP down as well. But the thing that you risk with that is like 3-4 defensive ends that don't get to the quarterback will see a big loss in their XP gains, and you'll really start to see them suffer. Whereas with outside linebackers, you really don't see like 4-3 outside linebackers suffer because it's still easy for them to get XP like it is with middle linebackers. With that being said, we go to corners. Cornerbacks are set at 110 because corners are pretty difficult to get XP for. Just in our personal opinion, when we've played through, if you get a ton of interceptions, even pass deflections with corners, even tackles, they just don't progress all that well. I don't know why that is, but whatever's factored into the game just doesn't allow them to progress very well, and so we have corners turned up to 110, and pretty much the same thing applies for free safeties and strong safeties. We have them bumped up to 105 because they are a little bit more difficult to get XP for as well. But like I said, the ones that you really want to pay attention to are the ones that are getting those high numbers, which would be outside linebackers and defensive ends if you're having that problem. Wide receivers, halfbacks, quarterbacks, those are the positions that are going to be getting the most XP, and the sweet spot is somewhere around the 80 to 85 range for some of those positions, maybe 90. And if you're seeing even more problems where some of these positions are just getting way too much XP, feel free to drop these down into the 70s. I've seen people out there running this at like 70, 75 even, if they're having issues with those positions. And if you want to have more of a challenge, feel free to drop those down. Now, the last two are kickers and punters. These ones are pretty straightforward. They're the most neglected position in the game. They don't get XP at all. It's super hard to develop a kicker or a punter, and it really shouldn't be that way because there are kickers and punters that come in from the draft classes on a fairly regular basis, and they can turn into legitimate NFL kickers, and you really can't do that with the base sliders. So highly recommend you bump these up to 120. You might even want to consider bumping them higher if you're not seeing enough of an effect on some of those young kickers that should be developing into starting kickers and legitimate NFL legs. So with that being said, those are my sliders here, my recommended sliders, my realistic sliders, whatever you want to call them here for Madden 21, at least early on in the game until we see more patches and things like that. Like I said, this is developed off of a base of 90 and playing a ton of games on a base of 90 for every single position and looking at whether they need more XP, less XP, how exactly that's playing out, and so this is where they're at. So one last time, I'll scroll through them. This is the offense in case you guys want to take a screenshot, and the defensive and special teams in case you want to get a screenshot of those. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully you find it helpful. Maybe you can utilize this to kind of use as inspiration for your XP sliders and make adjustments accordingly based off of this. Hopefully this helps influence your sliders in some way. If it does, make sure you guys leave a like on the video, comment down below with anything you guys would like to see next, and subscribe to the channel if you're new. I'll see you guys in the next video. Hope you have a good night. See ya.